Would you feed ancestral broth to your children if it was the only way to survive the winter? Picture this, a wooden hut buried in snow. The wind howls outside. It's 10 o'clock at night. Inside, silence. Shadows tremble on the walls. Your hands are frozen. Your stomach is empty. The fire barely breathes. And in the center of the table, a bowl. Steam rises from it. Thick, dark. The smell, iron, ash, and something primal. You recognize it. Blood. This is not a feast. This is legacy. This is what kept families alive during the 18th century, when temperatures dropped below 14 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 10 degrees Celsius, and kept dropping. When food ran out, they turned to the oldest knowledge. Nothing is wasted. In the medieval world, survival wasn't about taste. It was about what you were willing to accept and serve when death sat beside you at the table. Today you'll discover the brutal blood feast that became tradition. It still exists, but would you dare to taste it? It's 10 o'clock at night. The wind claws at the wooden walls like a hungry beast. Snow slides off the thatched roof with a low thump. The ground inside the cottage is hard, uneven, a frozen mix of dirt and straw. The fire is no longer roaring. It breathes weakly, flickering in a pit of ash. The smoke hangs low, and the warmth it gives is barely enough to keep numb fingers moving. A man sits near the hearth. His face is lean, his cheeks hollowed by cold and days without a proper meal. Beside him, his wife, eyes sunken but watchful, holds their youngest child wrapped in 2 layers of wool, both thin as parchment. Across the room, 2 older children huddle beneath an old blanket, their hands wrapped tightly around their knees. On the center table rests the pot. Its contents simmer slowly, thick and dark, almost gelatinous. The smell rises, not of spices, not of herbs, but of iron. A raw scent that clings to the air and the memories. This isn't stew, it's blood, fresh from the animals slaughtered just hours ago. Mixed with barley, fat, liver, and the kind of hope that tastes like desperation. This was survival in the 18th century, when 14 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 10 degrees Celsius, was considered warm and most nights dipped far below that. When famine swept through frozen villages like a silent reaper. When a meal wasn't measured in flavor, but in calories and courage. This is not just food, it's a decision. To eat or to die. To swallow pride, or let your children starve. The eldest son looks at the bowl passed to him. His eyes hesitate. The mother nods. The father says nothing. There is no celebration, no prayer, no toast, only silence. The kind of silence that grows when fear and gratitude sit at the same table. Tonight, this legacy broth may be the last thing they eat for days. Would you be able to face a night like this? Write in the comments. The butcher's knife doesn't sing, it thuds. A sharp, precise cut, not of violence but of ritual. The pig struggles for a breath it will never take. There is no scream, just the soft rush of blood hitting wood. Outside, the snow keeps falling. Inside, the bowl fills. This isn't a feast, it's an ancient technique. A lost survival art from the heart of the 18th century, when famine roamed like a silent ghost through frozen fields and empty pantries. In these villages, nothing was wasted, because nothing could be. Medieval peasants knew how to use every drop. As the blood poured, they stirred it immediately, adding vinegar or snow to keep it from clotting. Time was not a luxury. You had to work fast. Blood thickens in minutes, and if it thickens too much, it's useless. In that small, sacred window of time, they prepared the base of a soup that would carry their families through weeks of hunger. Her soup, dense with iron, fat, salt, and instinct. The recipe varied by region, but the principle was always the same. Make life out of what most people would throw away. They mixed the blood with barley or oats, sometimes bits of liver or kidney, animal fat scraped from bones, even dried nettles or onion peel. The result was thick, black, steaming, and powerful. In the absence of modern nutrition, it was a miracle. It warmed the core, it slowed the cold, it offered energy when no bread remained. In some homes it was served with reverence, in others with quiet shame, but it was always eaten. What may seem grotesque today was, back then, a sacred act of resistance. a defiance against the death scratching at the door, against the wolves, in the trees, against the silence of empty bellies. This was not cooking, this was surviving. Could you collect blood, stir it with your bare hands, and serve it to your children? The blood alone was not enough. Not for the heart, not for the cold. In the frozen corners of the medieval world, calories were not indulgence. They were armor. And the medieval peasants, those who endured the famine of the 18th century, knew this truth in their bones. So they added fat, lard scraped from ribs, bits of sweat packed into cloth, organs, fatty and dense, diced roughly with a dull knife, liver, kidneys, a single onion if they had, one, maybe dried nettles, a clove of garlic worth more than a silver coin, and always barley or oats, not for taste but to thicken, to hold together, to last. The result was not quite a soup, not quite a porridge. It was both, and neither. A thick, dark steaming mass that stuck to the ladle like memory. This wasn't food that invited appetite. It was food that warned, you are still alive. Don't waste it. It filled the stomach and slowed the chill. It burned slowly through the night. It coated the inside of the body like a second skin, not of warmth, but of resistance. This was medieval survival in its rawest form. A culinary shield, a fire inside when no firewood remained. In those frozen villages surrounded by snow and silence, this mixture saved more lives than prayer. It was forgotten wisdom passed down from mouths that had seen too many winters. And even now, if you walk through the rural north of Europe during the winter solstice, in places where the roads are barely marked, where the wind still sounds like wolves, you might find it. A bowl of black broth, thick, steaming, proud, still served, still eaten, still sacred, because some traditions don't die, not when they're carved into hunger, not when they kept generations from falling under the ice. This wasn't just a recipe, it was a rebellion. Against winter, against weakness, against forgetting. Could you eat it, knowing what's inside? Or would you let the cold win? Today we throw away leftovers. We scroll through delivery apps at midnight. We complain when the toast burns or when the flight meal is too bland. But in the brutal winters of the 18th century, the question was not what to eat. It was whether anything edible existed at all. Back then, in those frozen villages surrounded by silence and snow, the bowl on the table was not a choice. It was a verdict. If it had barley and blood, someone had survived the morning hunt or slaughter. If it had nothing, then someone had failed, and the family paid together. There were no refrigerators, no supermarkets, no second chances, only root. Cellar's instinct, and whatever ancestral techniques had been passed down by memory and firelight, and still somehow, they lived. They lived through nights when the temperature dropped far below 0 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 18 degrees Celsius, and stayed there for weeks, through days when the snow didn't melt, when the sky forgot the sun, through seasons where crops rotted in the field or never sprouted at all. Today we worry if the power goes out for 2 hours. In their world, power didn't exist, just oil. Lamps, embers, and the will to survive. A medieval peasant didn't eat 3 times a day. Sometimes 3 times a week was a blessing. They rationed what little they had with the precision of monks and the desperation of parents. They didn't ask if the food was organic, only if it could keep a child alive one more day. So when we look at that blood-thick soup with modern eyes, with judgment, even disgust, we miss the point. That bowl was a wall against death, a symbol of resilience. The quiet kind of strength that doesn't shout but survives. You might not taste it, you might not even look at it, but if everything collapsed tomorrow, if the stores closed, the lights went out, the heaters died, would you eat to live, or hold on to comfort and starve with dignity? Could you survive days without supermarkets or microwaves? In the heart of the 18th century, when the darkness of winter seemed to last forever, and the snow erased all signs of color and warmth, there was a moment, quiet, humble, yet sacred, that many forgot. It came just before the first spoon touched the lips, before the broth, before the heat. It came in the form of a gesture. The father, sometimes the grandfather if he was still alive, would lift the ladle, carefully, with both hands, his fingers red from cold, blistered from firewood, hardened by work. He would dip the spoon into the pot of blood, barley and fat. Slowly, no rush. The steam curled around his face like smoke from an offering, and then he would turn to the youngest, the smallest, the one who had survived the least winters and needed the most strength to face the next. He would serve the first spoon to that child, sometimes in silence, sometimes with a few words no one else could hear. This was not about food. This was medieval survival at its most intimate. It was a passing of the flame from the older to the younger, a recognition of the fragile line that separated life from death in those frozen villages, a prayer without needing to mention gods, a technique ancestral that didn't warm the body, but the bloodline. In some places, this ritual was followed by the sharing of the organs, the liver, heart, kidneys, cut and passed in order. Of age, of service, of respect, everyone ate, but not everyone ate first. For the medieval peasants, food was never just about hunger. It was about order, honor, continuity. The forgotten wisdom was not only in what they cooked, but in how they served it, who received it, and why. No one speaks of this anymore. No documentaries, no history books, no lessons in schools. We remember the wars, the kings, the plagues, but not the spoon, not the child, not the moment that said, "You matter, you carry." Our survival forward. Why did we stop talking about this? What other secrets of strength have we buried? Just because they no longer fit our world of lights, speed, and comfort? Now stop for a moment, really stop, close your eyes. Imagine this. The world goes quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind where power lines fall silent, engines stop, lights blink and die. The hum of the refrigerator vanishes. Your phone becomes a useless brick. The stores are closed. Not for the night, but for good. 3 in the morning. The cold is no longer outside. It's in your bones, in your kitchen, in the bed where your child sleeps, wrapped in 2 blankets that aren't enough. You hear your stomach growl. But it's not just yours this time. What would you cook? No deliveries, no electricity, no apps telling you what's nearby. Only what you know and what you've kept. Would you know how to store food without a freezer? How to ferment it like the medieval peasants did during the darkest days of the 18th century? Would you remember which roots are edible? Which fat burns slowest? Which forgotten technique might keep your family warm until the sun returns? This is no longer just about the past. This is about you, about your lineage, about the forgotten wisdom buried under centuries of convenience. The survival soup isn't just history. It's a question. How far would you go to keep your children alive? Because when everything ends, what remains is what you carry inside, what you've learned, what you've dared to taste when others turned away. So I ask you truly, not as a spectator, but as someone who still has time to prepare, which of these techniques would you use if you had to start again from zero? They called it the fire you could drink. It didn't crackle like wood or glow like embers, but when it touched your tongue thick and heavy, it moved through your body like a silent blaze. It didn't just warm, it awakened. This was no ordinary broth. In the heart of a brutal winter, this ancestral soup became the last defense against the cold. Medieval peasants, living in frozen villages with no insulation, no heaters, no electricity, knew that sometimes the only thing standing between life and death was a bowl of something hot and dark, passed from hand to hand. They mixed blood, barley, fat, boiled organs. It looked more like mud than food, but inside it lived the knowledge of 100 winters. It was dense, slow. It held heat the way stone holds sunlight after dusk. They said if you drank it just before lying down, you could make it through the night without fire, that your chest would stay warm even when the wind pushed its claws through the cracks in the walls, that your breath wouldn't fog, that your hands would unclench. The soup didn't just nourish, it warned your body. Stay alive. In a time when survival depended on what you knew, not what you owned, this technique was gold, passed through generations not in books, but in hands, from mother to child, from survivor to survivor. Today, we look for answers in technology, but maybe, just maybe, warmth doesn't always come from outside. Could you drink something that looked like that, smelled like that, felt like that, if it meant staying alive? If this ancient wisdom still moves something inside you, if you're learning, feeling, remembering, then like this video and subscribe to the channel, because what comes next is even more powerful and much harder to digest. But what happened when the blood ran dry? When the last pig had been slaughtered before the first frost and no chickens remained in the coop? When the root cellar held nothing but cobwebs and the barrels of salted meat were nothing more than hollow wood? What happened then? It's 3 in the morning, the kind of cold that makes 14 degrees Fahrenheit, minus 10 degrees Celsius feel like summer. A wind carves its way through every gap in the walls. The fire died hours ago. The baby hasn't cried in 2 days. That silence is louder than any scream. You've already rationed the barley, burned the last stick of fat. There's nothing left to boil, except desperation. So you look to what remains. A leather strap, the lining of your old boots. You boil it slowly, praying the salt and oil from months of wear might turn it into something edible, not delicious, just chewable, just enough to feel like food. Medieval peasants in the most remote frozen villages turned to bark, stripped from trees and simmered into broth. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it poisoned. They boiled moss, ground bones into powder, and yes, some cut slivers from shoes, from belts, from anything animal-based that hadn't yet turned to stone. This wasn't folklore. This was the famine of the 18th century. This was hunger at its most primal. This was not a lesson in survival. It was survival itself. Mothers had to choose who would eat the last bowl. Children learned that silence meant strength. Fathers stopped speaking, not from pride, but from shame. There were days no one spoke at all. When people say eat or die, they forget what that really means. Would you eat the lining of your coat if it kept your child alive? Would you boil bark, hoping it wouldn't kill you? Because the alternative already would? Could you survive if nothing was left but the will? This was never just about blood. Not really. The bowl passed from hand to hand in silence. The contents thick, dark, sacred. Medieval peasants knew it wasn't simply food. It was a bond, a memory, a test, and for some a form of prayer, not to the sky, but to those who came before. In the midst of famine, when the wind screamed louder than voices and the night stretched longer than memory, there was one truth stronger than any fire. Survival had to be shared. It couldn't be done alone. This is the part we forget. That soup, brutal, unappetizing, steaming with iron and grief, was a ritual of connection. The old would stir while the young watched. The mother would ration each bowl, but leave herself for last. The children would eat with eyes wide, trying not to waste a single drop, because this was more than hunger. It was inheritance. It taught. It shaped. It passed on something wordless. That to survive in a world without machines, without systems, without a safety net, you needed more than calories. You needed meaning. In every village where the snow buried rooftops and the soil cracked from cold, there was always one who remembered how it used to be done, how to store, how to preserve, how to make warmth from what no one else would touch. This was forgotten wisdom, but never truly lost. Passed from mouth to mouth like stories by firelight. It taught resilience, faith in the land, trust in simplicity. The kind of survival not written in manuals, but lived in bones, because one day the father who stirred the pot wouldn't be there. One day the daughter who learned the ratios of barley to blood would have to teach her own. And the brutal soup would return again, not because it was delicious, but because it worked. It brought life, it brought humility, it brought clarity, that sometimes what saves us isn't what we store, but what we're willing to pass on. Would your family remember anything if the world forgot everything? What if this was your last meal? Not a symbolic question, not a metaphor, a real moment under real cold with real hunger clawing at the walls. You're standing in a wooden cabin. It's 10 o'clock at night. Outside, snow is piling against the door. You haven't seen the sun in days. The wind sounds like it's tearing at the roof. Not angry, just ancient. Inside, your children are sleeping, or pretending to. Their stomachs empty, their cheeks pale, and in front of you, one pot, one bowl, one meal. What do you put in it? You can't order out. There's no generator humming in the background. No gas, no power. Only what you know and what you've kept, what you've learned or never had to. Would you know how to make a broth from bones? How to thicken it with roots? How to warm it enough to bring back color to a child's face? The 18th century, that decision was made every day in villages no one remembers. Medieval peasants didn't dream of variety. They dreamed of calories. They didn't hope for taste. They prayed for survival. And they succeeded because someone somewhere remembered how to cook without oil, how to season without spice, how to feed 5 mouths with 2 hands and a handful of knowledge. This is the kind of forgotten wisdom we laugh at today, until the lights go out, until the supermarket shelves are bare, until a quiet house at 3 in the morning becomes a battlefield between instinct and ignorance. So ask yourself truly and without irony, if your family's life depended on one meal, would you know how to prepare it, or would comfort itself be the thing that finally broke you? They ate what the land gave them and what death left behind, not because they wanted to, but because they had no choice, because the snow didn't care if you had pride, because the wind didn't ask if you liked the taste. They ate blood, organs, roots scraped from frozen soil, the skin of old boots, the bark of old trees. They swallowed fear, boiled into broth. They chewed shame until it dissolved into warmth, and they passed the bowl together, a father to a son, a mother to a child, a sibling to another, each one handing over what little they had, because there was no other way. They didn't survive because of strength. They survived because of memory, because someone remembered how, because the knowledge didn't die, even when everything else around them did, in the flickering silence of those nights, in the dark kitchens of the 18th century. They didn't just cook, they resisted. And when we look back today from the comfort of electric lights and warm floors, maybe we laugh, maybe we wrinkle our noses, maybe we scroll past, but something in us knows, deep down past the noise of modern life, under the layers of convenience, there's an echo, a hunger not just for food, but for something real, something earned. They served blood, we serve memory, because medieval survival wasn't a fantasy, it was life, raw, ruthless, and still beautiful. Maybe it's time to remember that survival doesn't taste like comfort. It tastes like courage, and sometimes like blood. If this story awakened something buried deep in you, then you already carry the mark. Join our brotherhood of ancestral guardians, those who remember so the world does not forget. Subscribe now and help carry this torch through the centuries. Now speak. In the comments, tell us, which ancestral technique would you use first to survive the brutal winter? What knowledge would you protect with your own hands? Your like is more than support. It's an oath, a silent vow that the wisdom of our ancestors will not be lost to frost or time. And if this fire still burns within you, don't let it go cold. Share this video with those you'd want beside you when the world turns quiet. Saving knowledge might one day save lives, and before the night grows darker, continue your journey. The next video now on your screen holds another forgotten key. Step forward. The path of preparation never truly ends.